You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-the-box thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who never quite fit in, and probably never will, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you through the expansive, exhilarating, and sometimes exhausting crossroads that we find ourselves in at midlife. Whether you're a seasoned listener or just joining the adventure, think of this podcast as your hot pink convertible cruising down the highway of change. Together we'll navigate the sometimes baffling backroads of midlife and collect all the cool souvenirs along the way. Get in and buckle up. Our map may have flown out the window miles ago, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to have a blast. Let's hit the road and discover the magic just around the bend. Wiley Women is a wellness brand that wants you to live your best midlife. Developed by a naturopath, they offer tinctures, supplements, and drink mixes. Wiley uses plant medicine and clinical studies to demystify and embrace the hormonal powers and hidden complexities of grown women from the inside. Female formulated and female founded. Plus, they offer free shipping and easy returns. I love the Unworried tincture, which has bacopa, holy basil, passion flower, and reishi. It helps calm my body and stops the spinouts. It reduces jitters and lightens my mood. Go to www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O at checkout to get 20% off. That's www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O for 20% off. Today I want to talk about being in midlife and struggling with technology. It took me forever to figure out how to record this podcast that you're listening to. I am 52. I will be 53 in January. By the time I release this, I might already be 53. But I've gotten to that age where I struggle to get things done. I avoid doing things. If it's techie, if it involves an app, if it involves downloading things, if it involves learning a new program, I've become very resistant. And I don't think I can afford to do that, and I don't think you can afford to do that either. Do you remember when you were like 12, 13, 14 years old, around there? Maybe your parents struggled with technology and you made fun of them. I have a very clear memory of when we first got a VCR, and my parents could not figure out how to set the clock. And it flashed 12, 12, 12 for like 6 months before my brother finally took over and fixed it. And I don't want to be that person. And I don't want to be somebody who falls so far behind that I can't do things. The world is getting more and more automated, almost to a terrifying degree, almost to the degree where it makes me almost feel unsafe in some way. Like technology is taking over. It's like off leash. It's running the show, and you can't do anything without a smart something. Our stupid washing machine came with an app that I refused to download. Because why does the washing machine need an app? Like, no. Like, don't you just throw the clothes in, throw the detergent in, and turn it on? Why does it need to be connected to other things in the house? I don't want my appliances talking to each other behind my back. I don't want the washing machine to be like, refrigerator, do you see that she spilled that tomato sauce on her shirt and now it's in the washing machine again? I'm just too paranoid to connect all the devices in my house to each other and to the internet and to Google and to Facebook and to Instagram. I don't know that I'm so comfortable, because I know it's beyond just trying to make your life easier. It is probably selling your information to some marketing company so that they can push more things on you. I don't think I have an interesting enough life for and I'm not so paranoid that I'm like, okay, the government is monitoring how much water you use, or the government is whatever. Although my partner has those suspicions. But for me, I just don't want everything to be pushing information to wherever to sell me more things. Although I know that if you have an Amazon Prime account, that's probably already happening. If you have Venmo, or at this point, a bank account, they know everything about you. And that's kind of scary. And I don't like it. But that wasn't the point of this episode, was it? No, it was not. My paranoid ideation was not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is you get to a certain age and technology kind of is taken out from under you. I'm sure 200 years ago, someone saw a light bulb for the first time or whatever for the first time and felt like, oh my God, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. We don't need this thing called electricity, or we don't need this thing called a car, or we don't need this thing called a calculator, right? I'm sure in a lot of ways, the more reliant we are on technology, the lazier we're getting, maybe the more complicit or compliant we're getting, the dumber we're getting, right? Whew! It's a heavy conversation. It's a heavy thing to think about. Where can technology help you and where can technology harm you? And do you want to be capable of it? Do you want to be competent in it? Or do you want to just, live in a cottage in the woods and write things on paper? Sometimes I really just want to write things on paper. I am very much an analog girl. I have a paper calendar that I keep all my appointments in, and I like it very much. I like it very, very much. And now that I do therapy on a couple of different platforms and run my coaching business on my own, all these Google calendars are talking to each other because I have different accounts for different parts of my business and feeding into one calendar. And supposedly it's supposed to make my life easier, right? Supposedly it is supposed to make your life easier. But for me, I find it much more stressful. And there's that other part of me that knows you can't just stay in the past. I think resisting technology is trying to keep things the way they used to be and the way that they aren't anymore. And you really can't do that, unfortunately. I would love for it to always stay 1998, because in 1998, you had an email, you had LiveJournal. Oh my God, I miss LiveJournal so much. And we didn't have things like Instagram, and we didn't have Facebook, and you didn't have a smartphone, and people didn't know where you were at every single moment. And you weren't reachable all the time. It wasn't an expectation of answering things immediately. No one could text you and expect a response immediately. You could be having a quiet moment by yourself on a walk in the woods and no one knew where you were. And that was amazing. I really miss that. I really miss being off the grid. Off the grid was how my childhood was. We had one phone line. It was attached to the wall. When we left the house, we didn't even have an answering machine when I was a child. There was no way to leave a message. If someone called you and you weren't home, oh well, they called back another time. People were much more patient. And 2 generations before that, you sent a piece of mail overseas, and it could be months before anybody answered you. Do you remember when you were in college and there was a payphone down the hallway of your dorm? If you were lucky enough to go away to college and live in a dorm, there was one payphone for like the 40 people who lived on your floor, depending on how big your dorm was, and you didn't even have a phone in your room. I remember talking to my parents on a payphone in the hallway and telling them I was fine. I remember being in London and talking to people from a payphone on a calling card and telling them I was fine and like, I'm okay, I'll talk to you next week, or I'll talk to you some other time. And that was vague and no one knew where you were. And oh my God, there's a big part of me that really feels nostalgic for that. I feel nostalgic for the simplicity of our lives before everything became so digital, so known and seen and constantly exposed and constantly talked about and constantly documented. I think there's like less than 100 pictures of me as a child. And if you are 45 or over, there's probably less than 100 pictures of you as a child. And everything is an actual photo that was printed out. Everything was taken on film and then sent to a developer. And then a week later, you would come and pick it up at CVS or Rite Aid or Pathmark or ShopRite or wherever you picked your pictures up from. And half those pictures had someone's thumb in them and were throwaway pictures. My brother and I have been going through my parents' stuff. My dad is in a facility and my mother is deceased. And it's amazing how many of those photos are terrible. Terrible pictures that we have the negatives to. Terrible pictures of like the back of someone's head, someone's, thumb hiding 3/4 of the picture, overexposed, pictures of scenery that we don't even know what it is, and we chucked probably a third or a quarter of those pictures. And that might just be a testimony to what terrible photography skills my parents had. But I think a lot of it was just the way people were in the 70s and 80s and 60s. Just pictures and nothing, unlabeled, thrown in a box. And there's good and there's bad to that, right? There's good and there's bad to living in a low-tech time. There's the freedom of it. There's the imagination, because before the internet, we had to just make stuff up. We had to make up our own fun, make up our own games, make up our own adventures. We were much, much, much more adventurous. And the disadvantages were, obviously, we were constantly lost, but we didn't care because we didn't even know we were lost half the time. We were not exposed to people all over the world, which I think is good and bad. I think now we're just much more aware of what's happening in the world, which can be absolutely amazing and absolutely overwhelming. I think the stage of technology that we're in right now is a giant blessing and a giant curse. In so many ways, we are fortunate to have information and access to so much. And then on the other hand, it's no wonder we feel stressed, we feel overwhelmed, we feel, stressed and overwhelmed, right? Like, it took me, days, because I am insistent that I'm going to be able to learn things and do things on my own. So trying to set up a mailing list, even though I had an actual instruction video from somebody that was kind enough to make this for me, it still was a big struggle because I couldn't understand why I needed to download a third app to take things from a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, into MailerLite. And why did I need to have a third-party thing to make that happen? I don't know. I don't care. I got it done with much struggle. And a lot of people are just advising me that I need to find a teenager or a college student to just do these things for me. Just edit the podcast for me. Just manage my social media for me. Just manage my mailing list for me. And part of me is resistant to that idea because I keep going back to the thought of my brother and me rolling our eyes at our parents and just being like, God, these old idiots can't figure out how to set the clock up on the VCR, and I don't want to be that person. I think like being behind on technology is just a way of giving up and not being in the moment where we are now. There's one thing to be nostalgic and old school and another thing to be left behind. And I'm wondering how you feel about that. Are you really like learning the tech so that you can be present in this present world? Or are you totally cool with a handwritten journal, a handwritten calendar, writing letters to people, and talking on the regular phone, like with no video? Are you like an old school girl, or are you a tech frontier and all your appliances are plugged into like some kind of smart house, including like your doorbell and your mailbox? Are you totally living in the Jetsons, or are you living in the Flintstones? Or are you somewhere in between? You can send me an email at yourmagicalmidlife@gmail.com and tell me, are you a Flintstone or are you a Jetson? Are you a digital girl, or are you hanging on to that analog world, or are you somewhere in between? I would love to know where you are, because I feel like I'm just musing about this to myself in my little walk-in closet / recording studio. And that's my thought on this for today. Before I go, I'm going to do something analog, and I'm going to pull a card for this episode. And I'm shuffling over here, and I'm going to see what falls out. And what's falling out is the Six of Wands. The Six of Wands is that initial achievement. It's a wonderful card for achieving your goals, feeling triumphant, feeling empowered, feeling like you can move forward. It's like you got an assignment and you achieved it and you did what you set out to do, but you know there's more work ahead of you. So for me, that could represent that I am recording this podcast despite the fact that there are so many technological things that I struggle with. And maybe for you, it is about setting your mind to do something and achieving it. And we both have so much further to go because technology just advances every single day and it's hard to keep up with it. Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife. You can also check out my offerings on my website, which is www.yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individualized coaching for women 45 plus who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-box thinkers. I also offer luxury retreats that include ritual, rites of passage, and ceremony for women 45 and beyond. I'd be so excited to work with you. Also, if you're feeling kind and you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star review as it opens this podcast to a broader audience and keeps me in those pesky algorithms. Thank you so much for your partnership with me. I appreciate you. Have a great week.